Welcome back to our voyage through the Gospel of Matthew. And this portion, we are going to be looking at a longer section, Matthew chapter 23, verses 16 through 22. And I will be reading out of the New International Version. Matthew chapter 23 and verse 16. Woe to you, blind guides! You say, if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he's bound by his oath. You blind fools, which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You also say, if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift on it, he is bound by the oath. You blind men, which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Therefore, he who swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And he who swears by the temple swears by it and by the one who dwells in it. And he who swears by heaven swears by God's throne and by the one who sits on it. Laws are time-bound and principles are timeless. And I think that's an important distinction to make. Laws are time-bound, but principles are timeless. And this is the heart of the dilemma when it comes to talking of and creating a sustained ethic for people to live by. Let us take human sexuality as an example. In the decades that I have left, or within the lifetime of my son, our understanding of human sexuality is going to be radically transformed. There are already, as I write, in existence androids, which are the evolution of the sex doll of the previous generation. The great premise from the electronic game world is immersive virtual reality. You combine these two items and you have sexual perversion gone wild. You will not have, strictly speaking, adultery. It is a machine, not a person. I'm not engaging with another person. It's a machine. An ethic would say it is wrong for two people are married to each other. That's what an ethic would say. But the principle would say that sexual lust is wrong. Think of Matthew chapter 5 and verse 28. The passage before us illustrates how an ethic can be destroyed by a lack of principle. In the day and age of Jesus, oaths were important. The backstory seems to be that people would say one thing and then do another. One of the means that you verified what you said was to swear an oath against the gold of the temple, the altar, the temple, or heaven itself. The point is that this was needed for people who were not able to stand behind their words. People would find ways to make an exception for their word. And the ethics of that day to swear by such and such was acceptable. Jesus' point is a principle, not an ethic. It is that we are to be people of truth and integrity. We need the people who do not fudge on the truth or weasel out because there is some exception in our case. In other words, to be people of faith and of commitment means that we must be people who remain true to our word. If you have attended church for any length of time, you know what the Christian code is. You know what is acceptable and not acceptable for you as a Christian to do. Now, I cannot tell you what it is, for it varies from country to country and from region to region. There are behaviors acceptable for Christians to do in one place, and it becomes unacceptable for a Christian to do it in another place. In the life of the church, if you follow all the accepted ethics, you will be embraced as one of the church. Now, the point is that often the Christian code of conduct is a veneer that really does not require one to incorporate moral principles into one's life. In other words, what we're talking about is a code of behavior that is largely external, and that churches often degenerate into external conducts of behavior. And that can lead to all sorts of bizarre things. You know, we've talked about this. Men wear ties of a certain color. Men must wear beards. Women wear dresses of a certain length. You cannot do something on a Sunday, or in the Catholic tradition, we think of you must eat fish on Friday. These are all sorts of activities which I'm not going to say they're unimportant and they had their rationale and reason, but they were things that you could keep without being committed to Christ and being a disciple of Jesus. They were not things that ultimately impacted our value system. You see, it is easy enough to have a veneer of Christian conduct and living, but that really does not require us to incorporate morals and principles within our lives. In fact, there is often a contentment with the veneer in the church, and any attempt to incorporate Christian principles in life will put one at odds with many in the church. We live in a world of noise. You go into the mall to shop and you have music in the background. You get on the bus to go home and you have pre-recorded messages in the bus telling you what is proper bus etiquette and what the next stop is. Or you get into the car and the radio is already set to play, and once the engine is turned on, the radio starts blaring. You go through the neighborhood for a walk and you have the blaring of car horns, or you have somebody's radio if the day is warm and the windows are rolled down, somebody's radio sharing the musical taste of that individual with the whole of the neighborhood. We live in a world of noise. Words are cheap and plentiful. Maybe what the world needs is less claims about what our faith is about and more people in the church living principled Christian lives. You see, we cannot always argue about words, but the person who by life and example lives out the faith is not open to that challenge.